Just start over. I'll cue you in.
Okay.
This is going on the pod, but not the video. By the way.
That's
Actually, hold on.
that's hecked up right now.
That's hecked up, bro.
So
we're...
kids naturally have more irrational fears than what adults have. Okay.
Yeah.
And it has to do with imagination. It has to do with just, like being vulnerable. Okay.
Right.
But we see the monster, take the form of so many different fears from,
Right.
People being burned alive.
So many personal demons for each character.
Yeah, exactly. To sickness, to whatever these kids are afraid of. And we see it play out. And every time it reveals himself, he's in a new form. And he's sadistic. He gets joy from haunting these kids. It's almost like a game. He only comes around once every 30 years, and he haunts the kids. The adults of the town have no idea what's going on, even when they return, and they dive into that a little more in It Chapter 2.
Right.
But just the idea of a monster that is preying on you, he is fueled by essentially killing these kids of the town, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But he takes his time to break them down mentally and emotionally and break up the friends because he realizes that they are more vulnerable when they're alone.
When they're alone.
So
right.
The times that we see the monster, really showing his full power, his full array, his full arsenal, if you will, of scare tactics. It's
Right.
when these kids are alone. And that's the scariest parts in this movie are when the kids are alone, when we kind of get an inside look at what it is that scares them individually as characters. When they're all together, the clown is not quite so powerful.
It has much less of a grip over him.
But the reason why the movie is so scary is because we have that sense of helplessness. We have that sense of isolation where when you're alone is when he's going to come after you, and there's not really much you can do about it because the monster is the clown, and the monster in a way is their town. Like
Right,
you learn throughout the movie that this town of Derry has been it is Derry, right?
Derry, Maine, I believe, yeah.
That this town has been haunted by it for forever.
For a long time.
We don't really know exactly how long, but he's been around for a long time. Every 30 years he comes back and he starts preying on the children of this town. And it makes you feel so hopeless. It also nails jump scares, and we kind of talked about that in last week's video. But it does jump scares so well because it shows you terrifying images of this clown who can distort his body and distort his face, and he says all of these creepy things, but it's always building up him as this kind of all-powerful being, if you will. And so throughout the movie, it builds up it as the monster that he is. We never it seems like he doesn't really peak. Like you get the idea that he's always getting more powerful as he gains knowledge of people as individuals. He knows how to attack them and he knows how to break them down. And that's what makes the monster so scary, is that he has no boundaries that he's not willing to cross,
Right. You also, one thing I think this movie really had going for it was you come for the clown, you come for the scares, and you stay for the main characters.
Yeah.
Right? The main characters are what kind of make you want to revisit that story, because not only does the director, I believe his name is
Andy Muschietti.
Muschietti. Is it Muschietti or Muschietti?
I don't know. I would guess.
Anyway,
I would guess Muschietti.
Very, very good director. He's directed a couple. He directed Mama. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yep.
That horror movie. But they really, really nailed the characterization of the kids. The kids have great personalities. They are interesting to hear speak, and they just kind of talk like kids growing up in the 80s. They cuss, and they have, they say kind of dirty things to each other, and they try and get each other to laugh, and there's so much of that just kind of very relatable personality that I think older guys like you and me who were, kids not too long ago can kind of latch onto, because it makes us kind of feel like kids again. It kind of reminds us of what we were like when we were, 12, 13 years old. And so that's I think one of the best things this movie has going for it is not only did they nail Pennywise the clown, right? They really took time to get each individual character to a level where you can kind of relate to them in some way.
Well, and they showed a level of depth with these characters that you don't see very often, especially in a horror movie,
and especially with child characters and child actors.
Yes, because they made them relatable, and
yeah.
it's at the same, as much as it is scary for us to watch because of just the helplessness of these kids, as they kind of have no escape from it.
Right.
It's also scary to watch because of the nostalgia factor. Like, we can imagine ourselves in those types of situations. We can imagine what it would be like as kids if our worst fears were coming to life and haunting us day in and day out. Right, with no end.
And that's the other thing this movie gets right, is it really highlights each character's kind of personal individual fear. So whenever the clown preys on them, it's easy to kind of cue yourself in to the fear. Like, it might not be a personal fear that you have, but that character has it, and being able to understand that and kind of really flesh that out in a character makes the dread and the kind of the feeling of helplessness feel more realized in a horror film like that, because you're automatically cued into that, and it makes you scared because they are also scared.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? And a couple other things too that I wanted to mention about it. First of all, Bill Skarsgård was absolutely brilliant.
He's so good. And that one of the greatest things about him was all like the weird movements and his kind of his cross-eyed smile, and the fact that he can like furl his lip open. That's all real stuff that he can do. Like, they didn't have to do that in post. He was just able to do that, and that adds so much depth to how well, like, kind of visualized the character is, and how well fleshed out the actual villain is.
Well, and his ability to act with his facial features and his skill and talent as a physical actor was very important to this role and to his casting, because the director understood that he would be in costume and prosthetics and makeup to kind of display this larger than life character. But in order to make it his own, Bill Skarsgård had to be able to, contort his facial features. He had to be able to act with his body just as much as with his mannerisms, with his speech and all of those things, because he wanted his character to come through, and he really took it and ran with it, and he made it his own. Yeah. Another thing to mention about it is just the way that, and this is a fairly new movie, came out in 2017. Right. It gave us so many, recognizable characters, and like the way that it drove horror within the pop culture scene is really, we don't see it very often, especially in a movie this new, after having already seen the It miniseries, after the books have been out forever. This movie, I feel like, really made Pennywise the clown into what he is, and made the story of Georgie into what it is now. Right. That it was able to do it in a way that past representations of the It character have not been able to do.
Couldn't quite do. Yeah.
And it absolutely nailed it. And it was able to put a story onto film from the books in a way that a lot of other films have tried and failed at.
And not really gotten.
Yeah, exactly.
And just going back kind of to Bill Skarsgård, the amount of physical effort it takes to do what he did with that character is really pretty it's pretty hard to come by these days, and it's definitely, I think it's something that's worth not just mentioning but also praising, because not only is it a physically demanding role, but I gotta imagine it's a pretty mentally demanding role too.
Oh, sure.
To play a character who just preys on children.
It's kind of heavy.
for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
For two different 2.5 hour long movies.
I don't know if you heard the stories too, and hopefully I'm not wrong in saying this because I guess I didn't actually look it up to confirm beforehand.
Yeah, it's fine.
I've heard that
we're no Wikipedia.
Leading up, well, who is?
Seriously,
and
who is more accurate than Wikipedia?
Name a more accurate source. I'll wait. Now, you can't.
No, I can't. It's Wikipedia. It's a .org, bro. They're perfect. Anyway.
Okay.
Continue with your point.
I just realized my mic was turned the wrong direction. So.
Oh, that's funny.
No, it's not.
It's not funny. Keep going.
Okay. What was I talking about?
I had talked about Bill Skarsgård.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you've heard this, but leading up to while they were filming it, they were filming all of Bill's scenes separately from the kids' scenes, and the scene where the clown is revealed to the kids, they hadn't let them meet Bill Skarsgård prior to that. They hadn't hadn't let the kids see him in his costume, in his makeup and prosthetics until that first scene because they wanted genuine reactions from the kids. And so in that first reveal where the clown comes face to face with the kids, their look of terror is actually real. Like they were terrified of him.
They're actually afraid.
And he, as far as I know, like he was never one of those guys who was just going to be a jerk to them on set or anything. He checked in with them and made sure they were okay. And you kind of have to with a movie like this.
Right.
But they were genuinely afraid of him to start, which, of course, only adds to the film. But you can also imagine that makes it a lot harder on the character and on the actors and the directors who are making it.
You know, interesting note, you brought that up. There was a similar movie that we're going to be talking about where the characters were not shown the creatures before they were actually in the movie, and in the first scene where they were introduced to them, The Descent.
Oh, really?
The characters did not see the humanoid monsters until the first scene they actually shot with them.
Whoa.
So those reactions are completely genuine because they had no idea what it was going to look. They knew there was going to be something down in the caves with them. They didn't know what it was going to look like or what it was going to be. So that first scene, the first reaction they actually all have to him is very, very real.
See, I think that's such an interesting technique or tactic. And this is not the purpose of our discussion today, but
no.
I think it's so, and it's almost unique to horror movies. We do see it occasionally with action films, depending on the character or dramas. But I think that's such an interesting way of directing because it really kind of takes away the acting, in a sense, from the actors. You can only act to a certain degree and make it feel real and believable. But when the directors and the actors are able to take away that kind of, fake, in this case, fake terror. It adds so much more depth to the scene watching these people react as if they actually would.
Right.
Because they are.
Because they are. So to kind of transition, because I think this is a good transitioning point in terms of, getting genuine reactions out of people, that was pretty much the entirety of John Carpenter's 1982 cult classic, The Thing.
Okay.
Which is the second movie we will be talking about in this episode. The Thing, when it was originally released, was one of the most poorly received horror films ever made. I mean, a couple hits here. It was called Instant Junk, A Wretched Excess.
Whoa.
And proposed as the most hated film of all time by many, many people. What's funny is, even when it was so poorly reviewed back in 1982, critics still praised the special effects. Because the special effects, every single one, every single monster design, every single creature, every single transformation you see in that movie is 100% real special effects. In a matter of fact, 10% of the entire budget that they used to make this movie was put towards special effects creations.
Yeah.
To make every single monster that's in the movie. It wasn't until, I want to say, probably a good 10 years after the movie came out that it was finally better received, and now of course it's regarded as one of the best, most influential sci-fi horror films ever made. And I do think it's because, for one, everything looks so real. The terror doesn't just look real, it is real, because it's actually something that they created to scare the audience. And, you've got heads popping off of necks in weird, contorted ways, and you've got the thing itself, like, imitates dogs at a couple points.
Well, you've got dogs that are basically, like, skinned.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Disgusting to look at.
When they actually cut the thing open after they've killed the dog, the thing when it's a dog, and you can, like, see, like, it's trying to, like, transform dogs inside of it while it's trying to imitate this life form. You've got so many different elements. You've got cabin fever. You've got the fear of freezing to death. You've got the fear of this monster that perfectly imitates other organisms. There's all of these things that kind of stack up. And on top of that, you've got these guys who are cut off from the rest of the world, who have no contact with anyone other than themselves. And this whole time, they have to try and figure out how to know which one of them is real and which one of them has been infected. Yeah. Right.
Well, and it's that kind of sense of isolation is pretty well established from the beginning, because you even kind of learn that the other people that are out there and are around are hostile. They don't have any. Right. They don't. There's no alliance. There's nobody there to help them when everything starts to go downhill. Right. They're by themselves completely.
Yeah. Adding more to the realism into the, garnering real reactions out of characters, they actually filmed these scenes in, like, 40-degree rooms.
Oh, wow.
They pumped the temperature down to basically freezing. So, like, every breath, when you see, like, the fog come out of their mouths, that's real. Yeah. They're actually, John Carpenter actually wanted to freeze his characters and give them the feeling that they were at this science station in Antarctica, despite the fact, most of it was filmed on sound stages and stuff like that. But they built these sets and they pumped the temperatures down to close to freezing. So whenever these characters are actually in these rooms, they're actually wearing these coats. They're actually cold. They're actually, they're actually perspiring as they breathe. All these things are happening because, dude, that's what the director wanted. The director wanted it to feel as real as possible.
Perspiring means sweating, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, well. Whatever. You know what I mean.
Sweating as they breathe.
I'm not a scientist, okay? I don't know all these science words. I'm just trying,
Next time we'll ask Wikipedia.
I'm trying to use big words.
I try that sometimes, and then well, you saw what happened.
Yeah, that's, I love this film. I've spoken obviously to the set design and the special effects and the creature design itself, but also the casting choices, getting these kind of big names for the 80s, and also having Kurt Russell be the lead guy. And Kurt Russell would go on to work with John Carpenter on a lot of other movies. He and John Carpenter were pretty close in terms of what movies they did together. But they had such a good cast of guys together who bantered off each other really well, right? You could kind of feel like you don't establish much time with them before the thing enters its way into their research station. The movie basically starts with the thing coming into the station and starting to wreak havoc on everyone that's there. Right. But even without that kind of setup, you still get a very good sense of who each character is, and as well as their relationships to each other and how they kind of might have been if this were just a movie about them doing science research in the middle of nowhere. Right. Right. You get through small bits of dialogue, kind of a good characterization, enough of a characterization for each character to actually want to know what happens to them, to kind of actually feel interested to see who makes it out and who doesn't.
Right. Well, and they show, even though they don't necessarily spend the time to show us how they interact for very long, at least without the thing. Yeah. they show enough personality and enough depth during these kind of trying times that you kind of get to see who they really are, because it exposes them for how they handle adversity, I suppose, and how they handle, the sense of not knowing and kind of living in constant anxiety of who to trust and who not to, and things like that.
There's a great scene at the start with Kurt Russell when he's playing the chess master, the old computerized chess master thing, and it checkmates him. And he takes his bottle of scotch or whiskey, whatever he's drinking, and pours it into the machine and blows it up. And he just says, "Cheating bitch." And that's it. It's a 30-second little, what would seem like a throwaway scene, but it's such a great little moment to kind of cue you into what his character is like. Yeah. And it's short, and it doesn't really, it's not very expository. It's just a short little scene. And he says like 2 words in that whole thing: "Cheating bitch." That's it.
Yeah.
And you get so much out of that just tiny little moment about who his character is, what he's like, what kind of decisions he might make, even just from that little bit. And this movie is full of those moments. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one thing that when it was originally released, people didn't quite pick up on. They were so focused on where's the horror coming from that it might have been easy to just kind of overlook these small little character moments that actually gave them a good kind of a good bit of what's the word I'm thinking of? Like, it made them feel fully realized. It made them seem not like just kind of people who were there to get killed.
Well, and it's kind of like you said too. It might seem like a throwaway scene, and a big knock on the thing was that it was so kind of grotesque, the imagery and all those things. But that moment occurred before we even see any violence, before we see any of these terrifying creatures.
Right.
So there's really no excuse to try to argue that there was no character depth or character development, because we do get plenty of those moments throughout the movie that are completely independent of whatever the scary imagery that we're kind of being forced to look at.
You talked about grotesqueness. We've talked a lot about on this show about gratuity for gratuity's sake. Yeah. And I think maybe people initially did think, well, this is just it's just so gross and bloody and gory, and it just, there doesn't seem to be...
Just focused on the shock value.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think perception on that has changed over the years, because people have realized they weren't really just going for shock. They were going for... I think it looked so real that people were just shocked. People were just in shock at how real it looked, and I think that kind of led them to think, this is just grotesque. It's just gross. It's just gratuity for gratuity's sake.
That's even watching it recently. Obviously, I didn't watch it in 1982.
Right.
That's how I felt seeing the creature and seeing it kind of transform and seeing the blood and the gore. The way, and I know you already mentioned this, but I didn't really touch on it. Mm-hmm. Their character building, their monster building, their the special effects, like you said, are so realistic, especially for the time. And you have to understand that in 1982 they didn't have the capabilities that we have now
for the time. But even now, right? That those special effects are, well, one, they are real. They're all real. They're all all done in the physical world. Mm-hmm. It's so realistic even now that it's hard to live up to something like The Thing, to the point where the remake in 2011 used 85 to 90% CGI for all the monster effects, which is crazy.
So here's a connection that I'm kind of noticing between The Thing and It. And I feel like we haven't really looked for these in any of our movies. They just have happened kind of naturally. Mm-hmm. And this is actually starting to become a theme in a lot of our horror discussions, is the idea of helplessness, first of all. But the connection that I'm seeing between It and The Thing is the idea of familiarity. So in It, these kids are seeing their worst fears kind of come to life, right? And it's something, we've all had those kind of irrational fears, and we discount them as being irrational. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Right.
In It, there is something to be afraid of. In The Thing, they all know what the threat is. They all know that there is something after them. Mm-hmm. But what they're not expecting is for the people that are most familiar to them and the places that make them feel comforting in kind of this, dreary landscape that they're in. And they're already isolated enough where the people and the things that are most familiar to them are now what is haunting them. Right. And I probably shouldn't say haunting because neither of these are like ghost stories. But
but
in
a way,
that idea of kind of
maybe not haunting.
There's not so many words to use.
Not haunting, but tormenting them.
Right.
I think another thing both of these movies really have in common is not knowing where the threat is going to be next.
Yeah.
And that's, again, we talked a lot about helplessness, how we might not know, or we might as the viewer know when the character is helpless, and whereas they may not know. Mm-hmm. But I think in both of these movies, something it does really well is it establishes that the threat is never not there. So as the viewer, we know there at any moment in time, one of these characters could be in serious trouble, and we don't know when it's going to happen. So that not only makes the character feel helpless because they don't know, but it also makes us as a viewer feel helpless because instead of knowing and seeing it when the character's not seeing it, we're in the same boat as the character in that we're just kind of going on this journey with them and going, the next turn, it could be there on the next turn. We don't know.
Right.
And that one thing that both of these movies does so well is it doesn't give you any cheap scares to kind of use as a red herring. Mm-hmm. Every scare in each of these movies is very well realized and very well utilized to kind of propel the characters and propel the monster to kind of the next big thing.
Well, and they always, they always carry weight. They always have actual consequences.
Right.
Of people dying. We're not tricked into being afraid. We're afraid because we see the potential that these monsters have for wreaking havoc.
Right.
Good.
Shit, man. I think that's good.
I think so.
I think we just gave them a good 30 minutes.
Nice.
Yeah.
We always do that.
We're really hitting the 30-minute pocket right now with all of these.
Yeah.
I think
even though we said let's aim for like 18 to 20.
Like 20 minutes. Whoops. All right.
18 to 20 per movie.
Pretty
there
much.
You go.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching this series. I believe this is the Thursdays.
I didn't want to say because I wasn't sure.
Honestly, we're not really sure. We've been recording these so much at this point. We're kind of losing track. Thank you so much, though. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave a like if you liked. Hit the notification bell so you know when the next one's coming out. Even though we've already given you the schedule for this week, it's just good to know exactly when it pops up.
And I don't even know at this point.
So exactly when it pops up, you can click on it, watch it, leave us a comment, leave us a like, leave us a dislike. Honestly, at this point, we just want to know what you think.
Let us know what you think of our series too. We've been trying something a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Let us know which setting you like best. Do you like the table? Do you like the conference room? Do you like the couches?
The couch? Honestly, the couch is pretty comfy. I like it so far. Anyway, if you listen to us on podcast, we are on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on any platform that has podcasting. There's a very, very good chance that our show is on there. So if you do listen on one of those, leave us that 5-star, give us a review, let us know what you think. Reach out in any way you want. DM us. We're everywhere. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, I don't know about Instagram. I don't know if we have an Instagram.
We're working on it.
I mean, we have personal Instagrams. If you want to hit us up on Instagram, do that too. I mean, hey.
And guess what? We want to interact with you guys.
We do.
The people who have commented on our YouTube videos, they got responses.
We've interacted with every single one of them.
I think if people start leaving 5-star reviews on our Apple, maybe we can start, giving them shout outs. If they ask us questions, we can answer their questions.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Yeah.
We want to interact the way that we can.
100%.
So be on the lookout for, like Gus said, all of our social media. Subscribe to everything that you can. We'll be pumping out new content all the time. We're getting towards the end of our Front Row Frights, but hopefully we'll come up with some new good series. And also just look out for Front Row Podcast coming back in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically the podcast just rebranded for the Spookies,
The Spookies.
The Spookies, yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Front Row Spookies.
Spookies. It's spooky season. All right. We'll catch us in the next video. We'll see you then. Boo. Ah. Dude, I'm wilding right now, bro.
You wilding out.